Hey guys, National Master James Canty III here with Chess.com, and today we have Game of the Day with Chessable Masters. Grandmaster Anish Giri versus Grandmaster Jan Nepomniachtchi. Let's get right into it. Now Giri starts with d4 and Jan responds with knight f6. Very easy, flexible, hyper-modern setup. We're either going e6 or g6 here, and just attacking the center with our pieces and our pawns here. So Giri responds with c4, a very common fashion here, as c4 just puts pressure on the center, Queen's Gambit style. Nothing new to see here. Jan responds with e6, as a Nimzo Indian is probably what he's looking to do here, especially if we see something like knight to c3. Then we have a very dynamic way to play with bishop to b4 and a Nimzo Indian that gives black a lot of options and a lot of flexibility. So after e6, we do expect to see knight c3 or knight to f3, and knight f3 is the move that Giri chose here because he wants to avoid the complications and the play that you give black in the Nimzo Indian when you play knight to c3. So we don't blame him for playing knight to f3. Now we have many options here for Jan. We can play maybe c5, d5, b6, bishop e7, or bishop b4 in a Bogo Indian fashion. But what he says is, I'm just going to play simple here and strike the center because I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to have something, an establishment in the center. So he plays d5 here. Not a bad move by far. And then Giri responds with knight to c3 here, just getting the pieces off the back rank, as you have to develop your pieces. You have to get pieces into the center. So he plays knight to c3. Not a bad move at all. And actually Jan responds with c5 here. Interesting move, we should say here, because somebody's going to get an isolated pawn. There's a lot of captures going on in the center here. You need to be sharp, and this is what they call the Queen's Gambit decline, semi-tirage. And actually, Grandmaster Daniel Dubois actually plays the tirage himself. He has some, they say he's revived the tirage, so it's a very strong opening and tactical. So we can see a lot of sharpness here going on with this c5 move. Let's see how Giri responds. He actually says, you know what, there's a lot going on here. I don't want black to clarify first, so I'm going to clarify myself. They call this clarity. When there's a lot of pawns or a lot of exchanges to happen, or even a few exchanges here, you want to make things clear. So when you take something, you're clarifying. So he clarifies the center here and says, hey, Jan, are you going to take with your pawn and open up the bishop and leave this as an isolated pawn, or are you going to take with your knight? And let's see what he does. He takes with his knight. Jan says, you know what? I'm going to take with my knight. I know this bishop's still in here, but maybe I can get him out with b6, bishop b7. It's not as bad as a French bishop would be if we're playing the French defense here with the pawn on d5. So I'm going to take with my knight. And now Giri responds with e4 and says, I'm going to take over the center immediately and almost force you into making a move like knight takes c3 so that I have a big center. And once I have a big center, I can do a lot around the big centers. I have more space. I have more opportunities. And Jan definitely takes on c3. Knight takes c3. Giri responds with b takes c3. And now if we look at the center here, there's two sides to a center, guys. There's a side that has to defend the center, and there's a side that has to attack the center. And sometimes having a big center is a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. But if it's very well protected, it's an excellent thing. But if it can be attacked too many times, it could be a big target and a very, very bad thing. That's why Alexander Alekhine liked to play the Alekhine, because he wanted you to have a very big center so that he can attack the big center. So let's see what happens here. After b takes c3, Jan plays c takes d4. And of course, if knight takes d4, we just have a very bad pawn structure here. It just looks kind of weird. Not really, really bad, but we're not a fan of just isolating our pawns like this. So Giri definitely takes with the pawn here. Nice center, but this one's kind of weak. This pawn isn't as weak because we can always play f3 eventually, but we have to be aware that these pawns aren't as strong as they look. So Jan says, bishop b4 check. I'm going to castle as soon as you move your piece. Bishop to d2, we're actually going to trade first so we don't lose any material. Bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, and then we have castles. Black is the first one to castle, but he still needs to finish his development. We also have a center to attack, so maybe moves like knight to c6, or even b6, bishop b7, and attacking this way. Maybe bringing the rooks and pieces to the center here, and doubling on the d file, because the d pawn is weaker than the e pawn here. And maybe even f5 in some cases after maybe king h8, because bishop c4 could be extremely annoying if we ever want to play f5. And what does Giri play? Of course, bishop c4. So you probably don't want to play f5 here. Now, bishop c4 is a very cool move here. You can also expect to see bishop d3 as another move, so you can push on e5 and then try to attack this side of the board. But Giri had other intentions here. Bishop c4, this is a really strong move. So now d5, yes, we're going to have an isolated pawn, but at least we can play around it. It's extremely strong, and because it's strong, we can actually do more with it. So let's see what happens. Bishop to c4 is the move Giri chose, and Jan plays knight to d7. Knight to d7, I'm going to develop and play knight to b6. In some cases, you also had knight to c6 too, but knight to d7 is what he chose here, and maybe knight f6. It's about being flexible, you know, not being very predictable here. So knight to d7 is what he chose in this position. Of course, we have to castle. Giri just has to get the king out of the center. And honestly, you prefer to be white here with all this space. You have so much space on the queen side. You have space on the king side. You have a lot of options here and a lot of flexibility. Black, not so much, but it's not over. It's actually pretty equal in this position. After castle, black chooses b6. And now he's trying to finish his development here and attack the center because there's nothing else to do. And there are two sides to the center, as we just talked about. You need to be attacking the center as much as possible, especially with the pawns in the center here. So after b6, Giri finally chooses to push this pawn now. He could have played rook d1 or even rook e1 or even rook c1, but he says d5 right now. d5, let's break it open. d5, we're going to make this either a very strong pawn or put the bishop here on d5 and put some pressure on this diagonal here. Rook to d1 can come. There's a lot of play here, but it also opens up play for black. When you push pawns, remember they can't go backward. So when you do push a pawn, you do leave some weaknesses behind. And he does take advantage of the square immediately and puts his knight on the best square possible. Knight to c5, creating a direct threat, gaining a tempo at the same time. Still in equal position. Giri plays rook f to e1. I'm going to defend my pawn. I'm not going to just let you take my pawn. And then Jan takes on d5. He says e takes d5. Let's make it isolated here. Isolated pawns usually aren't that good if you don't know how to play with them, of course. But Anish Giri is a monster and so is Jan. So, of course, we just allow this. This is definitely going to be okay for both of them. E takes d5. E takes d5. He could have taken with the bishop as well. But bishop takes, I guess, just allows him to play rook b8 and bishop b7. And he's okay here. But after e takes, very interesting. As this bishop could have some influence here. It could have a lot of influence. So just watch. Let's see what happens here. After e takes d5, e takes d5, and then the next move is queen to d6, blockading the isolated pawn. One of the first steps to controlling an isolated pawn is controlling the square in front of it. Boris Spassky says that actually the square in front is the one that is the most important, and it's very, very important. So queen to d6 is a very, very good move here, as it's just going to blockade the pawn. Now the queen is not the best piece to blockade, but you don't really have many other choices right now. And knight b7 to d6 is going to take a little bit of time. The queen on d6 is actually really good here, as it can play rook to d8 after bishop b7, rook to d8. We have a full defense here on this pawn. Another thing that you should do with isolated pawns, if you're playing against it, is to exchange the pieces that are actually defending it. So maybe a bishop trade, maybe bishop a6 could be in the future here, and somehow maybe even trading a knight or one of the pairs of rooks here, but we have an excellent game, and white's just stuck defending this pawn. So what does white play? He plays queen d4. Interesting move. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to take over to e5 square, play rook to d1, and just kind of hover over this pawn to see what black does. This gets very interesting, guys, as Jan plays bishop b7 as he's supposed to. There's nothing else to do. Rook a to d1. These are very simple moves, guys. Centralize all of your pieces. Rook a to e8. Very easy. Remember, we just said we want to trade some pieces. Try to get the rooks off. Try to get some of the heavies off. Maybe the bishop, maybe the knight. So that the more pieces that come off, this pawn gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So he knows that, of course, being Anish Giri, and he plays knight e5, says not today. We're not going to trade anything right now, not on my watch. And after knight e5, a6 happens. Interesting move here. This is also the engine recommendation too as well. And of course, Anish Giri plays, of course, the #1 move in the engine in this move here, which is a3. a3. This is very interesting. What is he threatening? Always ask yourself, what are they threatening? b5. So now, if we were to play something like h3 or even f4 or g3, b5 is going to happen, and then we either have to move our bishop off to protection here, or we have to go back to b3, and we're trading pieces, which this piece is extremely crucial in this isolated pawn or protection here. So after bishop to b3, knight takes b3, and pawn takes, and this pawn's extremely weak. And of course, we don't want to trade. So what does Giri play? a3. Very hard for some people to even find that move here, or even find the time they can actually make this move. a3. So if b5 happens, we go bishop to a2. And now, at this point, Jan just says, you know what, okay, I see what you're doing. You're going to just back up. Maybe we'll save it for later as a reserve move, and he goes rook e7. He's like, I'm just going to double the rooks. So what else is there to do? My queen, everything's kind of tied down. We're just moving pieces. We have the pawn isolated and is blockaded. Now we just need to probably double here and just create some more pressure here. Maybe even put our king on h8 because this could be annoying. Now, next move, rook e3. Anish Giri says, you're going to double? I'm going to double too. Or am I actually? Rook f to e8, and oh my goodness, something crazy happened right here. That is not a move. It looks so great, but it's actually not. Can you pause the video and see if you can find a move that almost ended the game here on the spot, actually, here from Anish Giri? The move here, guys, if you said it, knight takes f7. Wow, knight takes f7. What a crushing move. What do you mean? Well, let's take a look at it. Knight takes f7, such a monstrous move here, and very easy to miss, as Jan being a very strong player, as we know. He just missed knight takes f7. The queen is first off hanging. So let's take a look at this. If rook takes e3 happens, rook takes e3, we can just take the queen. It looks like back rank trouble, but not really. Knight takes, rook check, and then we can capture first, and then bishop back to f1. And actually everything is defended here. And we can also play f3 or g3 and get the king out, and we're fine. We're actually doing quite fine here. After knight takes f7, if you don't take anything, of course you have to take the knight, because if rook takes, we just lose the queen like we just looked at. Now if they take rook takes knight, then this rook is hanging. So the only other move you can actually make here is king takes f7, which that is the move that he made. Now he's forced to go into this line. Now can you find a follow-up, guys? When you make a move, always have a follow-up. What's your follow-up? The follow-up here, if you say rook e6, you're thinking just like Anish Giri is, knight to rook e6, what a strong move. What about knight e6? Well, let's take a look. Knight takes, that's just not a move. It'd be very easy if we just start a new game here. Pawn takes e6, and it's check. There's a discovery on the queen. The queen's gone. This is over. Let's get this off the screen. Rook e6. So he doesn't play knight takes e6. He's very limited on moves. The queen is absolutely threatened here. So he plays queen to d8. But look at this. The queen's now gone off the blockaded square. So the right combination here is exactly what Anish Giri played, is queen f4 check first, then king g8, just to get a little bit of pressure off of the rook. We trade first, rook takes c7, rook takes c7, and now the final blow, or the big blow here, d6 with check, discover check onto the rook here. And there's a lot of ways to play. Weird stuff's going on here. Weird stuff. If knight to e6, if you're thinking this, that's cool. Nothing wrong with this move at all. But actually, what can happen is pawn takes e7 anyway. Pawn takes e7 anyway could happen. Queen takes, bishop f1. And then you have queen here. So if knight takes, there's mate. Wow, insane. There's mate on the board here. There's a lot of play for both sides. And actually, knight e6 is not the move he chose here. The move he actually chose is rook e6, which is the best move on the board. And after rook e6, Anish Giri finally delivers the final blow here, guys, and it's more of a quiet move here. If you didn't see this game, then you probably don't know what it is, but if you have saw this game, I mean, it's beautiful even just watching it. Can you figure out what Anish Giri did to just seal the deal? It's like a quiet connector in certain books that they would call this. What do you think he did? White's move here, he played d7. Very simple. d7, tying everything down. This bishop is hitting air, basically. It's hitting nothing. The rook can't move. The king, just don't even speak about the king. He's in a lot of trouble here. The knight's only defending this rook, and you can't really, I mean, this is disastrous. Like, we don't want this, right? This is over in every way, shape, and form. After d7, the queen can't move anywhere due to d8 queen. What a beautiful move. So he tries g6 here just to get some left for the king, as king g7 is his only kind of move here, and he delivers the final blow. Rook to d6. Ouch, man, what a strong move. And the game is over in only 27 moves, as Jan Nepomniachtchi resigns in this position. Rook to d6, monstrous move, as I'm going to just capture some decisive material here, and I'm going to go on to win the game at this point. This was a beautiful game in Chessable Masters with Grandmaster Anish Giri versus Grandmaster Jan Nepomniachtchi. Make sure you guys are doing your tactics, because even though this was an equal game, one tactic decided the game in the Super GM battle here. And this is Game of the Day with Chess.com. I'm National Master James Canty III, and I'll see you guys on the next video.